Welcome, everybody, to the Interventional Endoscopist Podcast. I'm your host, Mankanwal Sachdev. Before I start, a quick note for listeners. This conversation is aimed at residents, GI fellows, and anyone thinking about doing your fourth-year Advanced Endoscopy Fellowship. We're going to walk through the real nuts and bolts of getting there in terms of mentorship, research, applications, interviews, choosing a program, and staying sane in that process. So today, I have a very special guest. I have Dr. Daniel Marino, who is a third-year GI fellow at NYU, and he went through the entire process. So what the purpose was today is that I wanted to get a busy fellow and get somebody who has been through this process and get their take on it. So basically, picture this: you're a busy resident on GI consults, and somewhere between scoping, notes, nights on call, you decide, I think I want to do GI. And then you're doing this in a GI fellowship and you say, well, I'm a sucker for pain. I think I want to do more training. I want to do ERCP. I want to do EUS. And then obviously I want to do complex procedures such as EMR and ESD. So the purpose of talking to Daniel today is that we're talking to someone who's living that exact story. So Daniel, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
So do you prefer, first of all, Daniel or Dan?
I've been going by Dan Marino lately.
And not to take the words off the Dan Marino, right?
Yeah, it's been working all right.
Yeah. So he's Dan's going to be a fellow this upcoming summer. And like I said, he's gone through the full journey, internal medicine, GI fellowship. He's obviously been through research and leadership, and he's gone through all that process. So thanks for being here. And tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's listen for the listeners. Let's learn who you are.
Absolutely. So, my name is Dan. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm the son of two nurses. My dad was actually a GI nurse, but my entire in like high school and before that was all about soccer. I played goalie. I did the whole Olympic development team, Super Y League. I don't know if that's even around anymore. And of course, the high school team. Went up to NYU to play soccer actually for undergrad. Got a few concussions in the first year. Decided I'd rather be a doctor than maybe a soccer player. So that's when I kind of focused on doing getting into medical school. At that time, I was really lucky enough to meet Dr. Scott Tenner, who was working on the acute pancreatitis guidelines, and he still wrote the most recent one. And since then, my career has been kind of set in doing something with the pancreas, something within GI, and just kind of, you kind of follow your mentor's path a little bit sometimes. Eventually got into medical school, and I was a third year when I was like, oh, I want to be a pancreas surgeon, do something with the pancreas. Because I liked working my hands. I played goalie, I thought it was just the next step. I did a general GI elective, and Dr. Marina Kim was the advanced endoscopy fellow at Robert Wood.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, come with me, come watch this. And then she took me with that entire group, Dr. Tehela, Dr. Tyberg, and all of them. And then I was pretty much set. I mean, at that point in time, it was 2019. I wanted to be an advanced endoscopist till since then. But I actually did an MD MBA. So I had another year to kind of like set up some research, get things going. Went up to Brown for residency where I had a fantastic time, had a lot of great mentors, and eventually ended up at NYU where I'm really enjoying my time here.
That's amazing. So you're kind of one of the exceptions to the rule. You didn't actually figure out during medicine that you wanted to do GI, and then in GI you figured out you want to be an interventional or advanced. You kind of learned that right from medical school or during your pre-medical school, actually, your electives, right? So yeah, that's amazing. So and then let's talk a little bit about when did you who are some of the mentors other than Dr. Kim and Kahela that kind of push you towards advanced endoscopy during medicine residency and GI fellowship?
Actually, it's pretty interesting. My residency mentors were all not advanced. And I did some things with Dr. Paul Akerman up at Brown, who was fantastic just to talk to and knows so much about all devices and everything. But my real mentors were Dr. Samir Shah, who at that time, I was lucky enough when I was applying, he was the ACG president. So imagine getting a letter from the ACG president and you're like, and we did a lot of IBD and actually, so a ton of IBD and a lot of research in private equity in GI, which is a whole nother topic that I think is very interesting. And we're still working on some projects together. Then of course, a few other fantastic people up there, Dr. Akwiasambang, Dr. Colleen Kelly, who, are also fantastic. So basically I had this group of mentors who not besides Dr. Asenbang did interventional, and they just said, just pick something, you wanted to do it, so just go do it. So that's how I ended up in the general GI fellowship. And here, since day one, I kind of sold myself as someone who wanted to do the fourth year. So people like Dr. Ganda and Dr. Haber and all of them were like, "Oh, you want to do the fourth year and you're barely a first year? Great!" So just being in the room, being around, and things like that.
So let's look at it from another step. So from residents who are in medicine right now, or even medical students, or people just starting their GI fellowship in a few months, this path of getting to advanced endoscopy sometimes can be a little confusing for people. So let's kind of lay it out for them and just trying to understand. So if you had to draw a simple map on a whiteboard for the person who's just the average resident, or not average, but the person who's a resident who wants to do or go into GI, kind of let's draw it out for them on what that looks like. So obviously we have medical school, we go internal medicine residency, then you do your GI fellowship, and then a fourth year. But how would you explain that timeline and where you should make these key decision points to somebody you're mentoring?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell the people that I work with that you should decide early if you want to do it. Um, I think GI fellowship is getting more and more competitive each year, and there's the people who do a lot of research, and even sometimes even in residency are involved with committees. So it's being more and more competitive. So as soon as you can, what I always recommend is just trying to find people in your institution that publish and are affable and have a track record of getting fellows, residents into fellowship. And just hanging around endo, to be honest, just being around just got me so many opportunities. I just hung around the endoscopy suite. People are like, "Who's that?" Initially, then eventually like, "Oh, Dan's here again. Oh, by the way, there's a really cool case I should write up. Dan should do it." And just being around, it really makes the biggest difference. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about in residency is just providing excellent work when you do a project. So someone says, do this project, follow through, and make sure that you do it to the best of your ability, because that's just going to set you up for the future.
Yeah, no, exactly. And follow through is another important thing. As a program director, and having when I was a program director of an advanced fellowship, I used to get random emails and requests, not just for advanced, but also to help them get into general GI, which I wasn't able to, but because I wasn't involved with the general GI program. But
Mhm.
the thing was, like, you had so many people who would come to you hot and heavy. I want to do a case report. I want to do this. And they would get you the poster, but then they would never follow through because they already got their interviews and they already, and as a program director, most of us see through that. We know when that's happening. So if you are a medical student or resident or even a general GIFL at the moment, you want to do that, make sure that whoever is, mentoring you, that you're actually following through for them, because it's important. It's kind of silly to have all these abstracts just floating out there and not actually have the ability to turn them in papers. And it's tough because I went through the same process when I was a resident. I have a ton of abstracts that I never turned into papers as well. And it's a little bit of a regret, but you just have to keep being better each time. So when you talk to general GI fellows, kind of give us points that when should they know that they want to do advanced? When should they make that decision so that they can be the most competitive candidate?
Yeah, I think the most important part about being a competitive candidate is getting to a program that's good. Getting to a good general GI fellowship is probably the most important part from what I've been hearing through the grapevine. And then often people know as soon as they get their hands on the scope if they could ever live without that again.
Yeah,
From my opinion, so people know pretty early. And then once you start just trying to get into the connections and getting as much hands on as you can. Again, all these things are just the earlier the better, so you can just make the connections and get the research experience that you need to do so you can move on to the next step.
100%. I mean, connections are such an important part of this. And obviously, if you're one of the people who don't know you want to do advanced, and it only comes up to you when you touch the scope for the first time and you realize, hey, I really like this and I'm good at it. You may be in a situation where you don't have those mentors who can help. So that's where hopefully you're in a city where you can reach out to people, but with Zoom and Google Meets and all that, it's a lot easier to get mentorship and work on things with people even across the country than it was maybe even 10 years ago. So let's talk about the part that everybody worries about. How can I become competitive? That's a question a lot of fellows will ask. What makes me more competitive? So when you look at your own CV, Dan, what are the big pillars that you think matter the most for getting into advanced endoscopy? Like, what were those things? Clinical performance, procedural exposure, research, leadership? Kind of speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think the first thing on the CV is like your name and then your credentials, and then it's where you went to fellowship. So I'm just harping on try your best to get in the best fellowship you can. And then I think it's research, but there's to some degree a lot of I mean, there's definitely a wide breadth of programs. Not every program is looking for the next, big endoscopist researcher. Some programs are looking for people who just want to do good work and learn procedures and things like that. So I think really what this comes down to is figuring out what you want. Do you want to go to a program where you could be trained, learn to be an academic gastroenterologist, advanced endoscopist, and push out research and get involved with devices, or do you want to go to a program where one day you could end up in a community practice or private practice, something like that? That knowing that, I think very early, at least from when I'm talking about to people who are applying with me on the interview trail, was very very important. Trying to figure out what the programs could offer you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually it's interesting because a majority of the programs were academic. When I ran a program, it was non-academic. I mean, in the sense that we were a private practice that was running an advanced fellowship. And I would get these personal statements, which, yeah, you write one because you have to submit them to everybody. But, I would read it and someone's telling me they wanted to be the next Todd Barron. So, well, son, that's not happening over here. What we were going to train you for in my program was to be a very good private practice interventional endoscopists who would be doing somewhere between 50 to 75% of their time as interventional and the rest of their time as general. And, you read these personal statements and people think that program directors or screeners don't read them. I read every single word of every application. And, if you were telling me you wanted to be an academic person, it wasn't anything I held against you. It's just that I knew I wasn't going to be able to offer that to you. So I wasn't going to interview you in those situations. But it's really important to know what you want, and what's always fascinating, I've had this conversation several times, is on the general GI side, I'd say about 80 to 90% of the applicants always say they wanna go into academics, but in reality, 80 to 90% go into private practice. So, be genuine as well. Know what you want is something I would tell people, and don't be shy if what you want doesn't always match up with, because then it won't be a good fit. So,
Mhm.
for you on the procedural side during the GI fellowship so far, was there any kind of skill set that you intentionally tried to optimize, or that any exposure of certain cases that you tried to do? I mean, I don't think most program directors really care if you have ERCP skills coming in or EUS skills coming in, but at the same time, are there things that you tried to do to make yourself a better advanced endoscopist, even
Oh,
now?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think again, just being around, being in the room, even watching cases from masters in the field or even anyone in the field is really important. I've heard through the grapevine that there's like this thing about maybe picking up habits in ERCP or something like that that you don't want to take into your fellowship because then you have to break the habits. Lucky enough for me, I kind of learned the habits from the people I'm maybe learning from next year, so I don't have to break any habits, I guess. But just hands-on in the room as much as you can, do whatever someone will let you do. And of course, you should be able to do the basics extremely well to start moving on to things that are more complicated. But I think it's not necessarily a numbers game. Sometimes people talk about just getting a ton of, outpatient EGDs, colonoscopies. It's really different doing cases that are bleeders or food infections or things where you're doing therapeutic procedures. I think having a higher volume of those, which I did switch an outpatient elective for an inpatient consult elective one time. It was a lot, but getting more of these acute cases where you're doing therapy kind of does make a big difference, I think, when you're moving on to your CP, US, and resection.
Yeah, no, and what I tell all my advanced fellows and general fellows I work with is that every procedure you do is a building block for something that's more advanced. So if you just, for example, talk about ERCP, right? Um, sometimes you have to do needle knife sphincterotomy. Well, needle knife is essentially a building block towards doing an ESD. Polypectomy is a building block for EMR. So I think the more that you do, if your basic procedure skills are good and or excellent, then your advanced skills will become better as well. So I tell the fellow, even if you're an advanced fellow and you get the scope taken away from you because you're not getting into the bile duct, not cannulating, well, ask your tech, respectfully, if you can do the teching for the case, so that you're engaged, you're always involved, you're learning something. There's something to learn in every procedure. So I think whatever you can get your hands on is going to make you a better interventionalist down the road, for sure.
Absolutely.
So now I kind of want to get into the process. I mean, I know, we talk about the match. So let's kind of, for those incoming GI fellows or the beginning GI fellows or even the residents, let's kind of talk about the Advanced Endoscopy Fellowship, and match and strategies and how you do that. So it can feel like it's mysterious. Most people are familiar with the match because they had to do it for residency. But if you haven't gone through it, there is one for advanced endoscopy. It's sponsored by the ASGE. So why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about what it is in simple terms from a fellow's perspective?
Yeah, I think if you went through the medicine match, it's a little bit different. Maybe from the you actually submit your own resume. You don't have to put something into ERAS, which for me took quite a while. But basically, you submit your application at the end of February, and then you start hearing from programs maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Over time, you set up an interview. Which is a different experience in itself, I think, from the general GI fellowship, because advanced hospitals are very busy and you're kind of interviewing maybe at 6 p.m. Their time, which is not 6 p.m. your time. So you're just trying to figure out ways to talk to each different interview person. And eventually, after the interviews, you submit a rank list just like you did for I guess medicine residency and as well as GI fellowship. And then the match date is in July. The part where I dropped out was I didn't submit a rank list, but I did do a bunch of interviews and a bunch of fantastic
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. So every once in a while, a fellow will really impress the program a lot, and so sometimes they're willing to drop out of the match and take a fellow that they really want, and that can be a good thing for both parties. Actually, you get somebody that you really value, and they get into the program they want to be in. So for those people listening, for the upcoming year, that's for the upcoming cycle for applications, October 1st this year, that just passed about a month and a half ago, was when programs could start entering the match. And December 3rd is when the entry cuts off for the program. So if you're, and that's not for the fellows, that's for the actual program directors and their coordinators. We have to get everything put into the website that the ASG sponsors. The website is, if you just go to asge.org and you go to education and you scroll down to the bottom, there'll be a little AEF shield, and you just click on that, and it'll take you to the website. Now for applicants though, January 7th is when you can access the website. So you're going to be able to review programs, you're going to be able to register, and you can start looking at what you want to do. And then applications open. And then the last day for applications is February 20th, 2026 at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So you have roughly 6 weeks to really apply for programs. What you will need is your CV. You'll need 3 letters of recommendation, 4 for some programs, 2 for others, but 3 is a good number to start with. And what else, Dan? What else do you need? You got your CV, you got your letters of recommendation. You'll need your medical school certificates, your
Yeah,
diploma.
just the normal stuff for applying. Yep.
Yeah, you just have to upload it. It's a very simple process. It's not like you have to fill out a million little boxes like you did with the ERAS, as you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely.
And then March is when the interviews go out, March 5th, 16th of 2026. And your rank list would be due June 24th, 2026. And then the programs have to rank on June 26th. And then on July 13th would be match day for the interventional endoscopy match. So when let's kind of walk through. I mean, you didn't submit a rank order list, but you obviously in your mind you had your program that you're going to as number one. How did you kind of go about deciding had you submitted your list? Because I'm sure you had one. What was going to be number two and number three? How did you kind of organize it? What were the thought processes behind that?
Yeah, I think, wanting to do this for so long and with the people that I learned about this from, I did want to have some exposure to third space endoscopy. So that was the main thing, making sure I go to a comprehensive program that would teach me all of these things. So that's kind of how I ended up figuring out what would be the other programs. And, the places that you get hands-on time with things like that were very important to me. Um, More about, the culture. I think every place has a different culture and has a different degree of, if they want research, if they want more clinical and things like that. And again, it's just what you want. Just find the program that you down deep in your heart know if you want to be an academic, ECG on the podium person, or if you want to be someone who, works in the community and does really good work. So you just kind of have to match the expectations with what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that's really useful for fellows, I think, on the ASGE's website is that many programs we were required to put our volumes for each procedure out there. So that's a good resource to learn. If you, for example, Dan wanted to do third space, and my program doesn't offer third space, so that would have been foolish of him to have applied for my program at the time. Because I quite clearly put on there that we didn't offer poem, we don't offer that. We offer this many ERCPs, this many native papillas, blah, blah, blah. But it's important to really be deliberate about that because there's a cost associated to this as well, right?
Oh, definitely. I think the more programs you apply to, it initially starts off pretty reasonable, then it gets a little
Yeah.
expensive.
I think I saw $125 for the first 5 or 10 programs, and it jumps up to 500 after like 15 programs, and $1,000 for unlimited number of programs. But honestly, if only 15 programs meet your requirements, then don't bother applying to the other ones because you won't be happy with that. Um, also geography matters for a lot of people too, in case volume. You mentioned doing a lot of interviews, and I assume most of those were on Zoom, right? Other than the ones that were local in New York, were they all Zoom interviews for you, or did you have to fly out anywhere?
Yeah, there was actually only one that was local, that was, in person, which thankfully was local. I didn't have to fly anywhere. I also didn't apply to too many places outside of the tri-state, or I guess including, the Northeast coast, how about?
Okay, okay. Yeah, because I think that can also add to the cost. But so with Zoom interviews, right? You mentioned something about learning the culture. That's a hard thing to do. Like, how would you learn the culture of a program? Obviously, you're doing a Zoom interview. So how did you go about knowing that program X, Y, or Z really didn't have the culture or did have the culture that you wanted?
Yeah, I think, so as soon as you figure out that you wanna go down this pathway, just start talking to everyone on this pathway. So I met a bunch of fantastic people who did the match the year before, and I talked to the advanced endoscopy fellows at my institution who interviewed at similar places to what I did. And, you're never really gonna figure out exactly, I mean, you'll know, like, if they want you to do research or not kind of pretty quickly, but you're never gonna know exactly, things about the program in terms of, culture and, like, maybe like the work expectations and how late you are really there, until you talk to people who've been through the interview process and just know other people. I mean, I think the community seems to be getting smaller and smaller the more
Yeah.
you go down this pathway, so everyone knows everyone.
It's kinda like a pyramid, right? Everybody,
Yep.
you have a broad base, and as you get very specific in any field, but specifically to us, GI, those communities are smaller. So, can you walk us through a rough timeline from the moment you decided to actually go through with the application and to the moment you submitted it? Like, what that calendar look like for you? Talking to mentors, choosing programs, asking for letters, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the first thing, um so I guess I decided, I knew I wanted to do it pretty early. So
Mhm.
of course I talked to my program director, and he told me to meet these people who would be fantastic mentors. And I kind of worked with them and did some research with them. So I kind of had that part cooking in the first year, and I guess first half of the second year. And then I remember getting my app together kind of in December and January in terms of the actual, like, CV, like the written things that I need to have done. I believe I asked for letters in like September because everyone's very busy, so you
Yeah.
just want to make sure that you give them enough time. And then, just like in any time you're asking for a letter, just um, uh, patience and persistence. Everyone's busy. Just and every email every 2 weeks, be like, "Hey, did you think about this at all in the past 2 weeks?" And eventually, over time, you get everything together by the end of February. I need to submit it.
Yeah, and because the hard part too is obviously with the application season opening January 7th and closing February 20th is if you start asking in December, you're running up against Christmas, Hanukkah, etc., all the religious holidays, and people's minds are in completely different directions at that point. And you don't want to ask January 1 because that doesn't give enough time for them to get you everything before February 20th. So September, October sounds like it might be the sweet spot, definitely before Thanksgiving, so that
Mhm.
people have time to write these things. And
And when
this,
you
do you,
when you ask, oh, sorry.
so go ahead. You go ahead, please.
Yeah, and when you ask, we do, of course, with people you work with, and I guess there's probably some benefit to having bigger names, but it's like go with your CV, go with your story, go with your elevator pitch if they don't know you as well as maybe you'd hope them to. Make sure they know like what you're looking for and what you want to do. And often that makes a big difference in them writing the letter within like maybe 2 months instead of 4 months,
Yeah.
because they know you and they know what you want and they want you to succeed.
I think that letters of recommendation can be one of the more anxiety provoking portions of applying for any job, let alone fellowships. But yeah, and then the personal statement is something I get asked a ton of questions about. And how'd you go about that?
It's actually, crazy enough, I almost used the same one for general GI because I've known I want to do this for so long. So for me, it was just like a few switches
Easier.
from like, I've never held a scope before, but I want to do this too. I've held the scope and I think I'm getting okay at this, so I really want to do this. Um, so that was nice. But from what I hear, it's kind of just highlighting things that are important to you and you think that would be important to programs. Like if you're involved with committees, if you're doing a ton of research, showing that you're clinically excellent as well, though that will come through letters of recommendations. Just the normal things for a letter of recommendation for anything that you kind of done in internal medicine residency and GI fellowship. And often, when you get into this point, you're very seasoned at applying for things. This is your third, and if you like medical school, college, this is probably like fifth, sixth
Yeah.
time you applied to something. I always tell people that you did so well this far, you're gonna do well in the next one too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you didn't get into medical school and internal medicine and GI, three things that are extremely competitive in life. You didn't get there by being bad. You got there because you're good. So there's
Mhm.
no reason to think you're not good. And that's the hard part about it from a program director insider perspective is number one, I hate the personal statement. I think I hate it because it's something everybody has to do. We've always done it, and it's just something that's part of it. But reality is Ev everyone's not everyone's, but a majority of them read exactly the same way. I remember I was this many years old and my so and so got this kind of cancer, and it was at that moment I decided I wanted to be a doctor. I get that story so many different times that only one of them ever stuck out with me. It was about a candidate who actually had cancer himself. And so I actually ran into him at DDW and he had no idea who I was. And I'm like, hey, I saw his name tag. I said, How you feeling, man?"
Yeah.
And but like,
Sure.
yeah, the personal statements to me are so bad in general, but you have to do them. So always make sure it's good, it's engaging. Have a bunch of people read it, and obviously make sure you don't have major grammatical errors, especially in this day and age with AI and Chat GPT. You really have no excuse for that. But you also don't want Chat GPT to write it for you. So
No.
all
I
right.
just want to highlight the one more time that just once just tell people.
Yeah.
Once you know that you want to do it. So I knew pretty early. I asked my mentor, Dr. Rabia Delator, that I wanted to do it, and she just kind of said, "Oh, you should meet Lauren Kana." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, great." And then she ended up being the program director. And then you should meet, and your mentors kind of set you up and tell you who to meet and what you should do at the time. So really leverage them because they want to see you do well. They want to see you match, and ultimately, like we said before, the community gets smaller and smaller. They want to see you, as a
Yeah.
colleague one day.
100%. And I think, there's a lot of joy for mentors to see their mentees succeed. And, most people aren't involved in academics or teaching, right? And so if you're involved in that, you really have a desire to see people do well. And nothing shows that they're doing well. I mean, nothing is a better reflection of you if your students aren't, are successful. So, so let's talk about an interview day. So you mentioned Zoom. So what's a typical Zoom interview look like, and what did that, one in-person interview kind of? You walk us briefly through how those days went and how it worked.
Yeah, it looked like this. I had a ring light though, so the lighting was a little bit better, but this is almost the exact same thing that it looked like. Usually it started pretty early, and you kind of talk through. So let me see. Usually there's a program like introduction where they talk for 15, 20 minutes about the program. They kind of highlight their numbers, they highlight notable alumni, and then you just meet often the 4 or 5 interventional, endoscopists on staff at the place. And, I think from what I understand, they're just kind of looking for someone that they could work with, be shoulder to shoulder, close to 12-ish hours a day, and trust them on the weekends and trust them on nights. So I think my biggest advice for the actual interview is just, be yourself, be normal, and just, you've wanted this for, most people have wanted this for at least a year or two. So, you're interviewing for your dream job kind of. Some of us wanted it a little bit longer, but you're interviewing for your dream job. So just be excited and just be
Yeah.
all the things that got you as far as you did at this time.
And what kind of questions did the programs ask you? What were some of the ones that stick out to you, other than where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely that one. And it's kind of interesting because when you hear that from an academic place, I imagine some people who are less academic are like, "Oh, I'm gonna get an NIHK award or whatever like that,"
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But the most ones that stick with me are just the personality ones when they're trying to figure out if there's someone that they want to work with. The ones that like, how did you get through a tough time? Have you ever been discriminated or whatever else? That kind of show who you are as a person more than the ones that don't stick with you are like, oh, I saw you did this study in pancreas and whatever, whatever. Like, why did you say this p-value is correct? Which happens very rarely, thankfully, especially for the advanced endoscopy. More of the general GI fellowship, that kind of thing happens. But those questions do come up intermittently.
Yeah, and I think if someone's asking you that, that's to me is a red flag. Like, do you really want to work with somebody who's going to question how you came up with the p-value and something you wrote with a mentor 10 years ago? Is like, personally, but I mean, I tend to be a little bit more loose with these things. But so on the flip side, what kind of questions did you ask? What was important to you when as a fellow, and what kind of questions should people be thinking about?
Yeah. So important things to think about. Um, who you're scoping with most of the time. Are you free to bounce around? Are you kind of stuck in one room all day? How do you manage the inpatients versus the outpatients? Are you doing inpatient things sometimes that potentially could be offloaded by other people? Do you have an APP or do you have a PA or do you have someone else that you're working with? Often these things are all told to you during that little presentation before. Um, but maybe the bouncing around thing is a little bit more because you want to see you have 1 year to learn everything. um, 52 weeks, I guess if you take vacation, which I do plan on taking, but
Please.
52 weeks 52 weeks isn't enough to learn all this stuff. So you want to be able to see cases that you want to see. Um, Other things that are important, I think, is there a research requirement? They'll often say this in the beginning, but like, what exactly does it mean when you have a research requirement? And then, of course, like, what does the call look like actually? Which is more like of what you asked the fellow, but is the call like you're getting called about the attending's bowel prep, like for their patients,
Yeah.
or are you getting just like emergencies? And then how do you interact with the general GI fellows is I think probably the most important thing. At our place, I see the consuls as a general GI fellow for the advanced endoscopy fellows. Like if you have a good relationship, if there's no animosity, those things work fantastic. But if you can kind of get some hint that there might be some animosity from asking these questions, that might be a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, and another thing to really focus on too is a lot of programs. So as people may not know, ASG or fourth year fellowships, advanced endoscopy is not ACGME accredited. There's no accreditation. So with that means that there's no federal money helping to fund that spot. So many programs are either funded through philanthropy. They used to be about 15, 20 years ago. Several programs around the country had funding from industry, but that's no longer the case. But many of them are self-funded. So the fellow needs to generate some revenue in many programs in order to pay for their fellowship. And so you may have to do general GI work as an advanced fellow. That may look like 1 month a year as an advanced attending. It might look like one half day a week of screening colonoscopy. Or in my program, it actually, when we did it, it was 1 week of inpatient service every other week. So we were probably the heaviest general GI load, but many of those fellows enjoyed it because it really helped them sharpen their general GI skills as well. With that being said, I think that's an important question for any fellow to ask is, what is my general GI requirement, if any, and I think that's an important thing to know. And so my program, when I know several people, nobody would ever tell me to my face, but through the grapevine, that they declined to rank us because they didn't want to do that much general GI. And I had no problem with that because it was, it was what it was. So when you sat down to make your rank list, and you obviously got a phone call and said, "Hey, we want you to stay here at NYU, so don't worry about submitting your list." But as you were doing that, was geography the most important thing for you? Was it culture? Was it volume? Was it third space? Of the 4 or 5 things that it could be, what was number 1 that was in your mind as you made that list?
I think it was the attendings. That was
Okay,
the major thing. So you wanted like from the interviews, you get to meet all these, famous people and you get to figure out which ones that you want to work with. You've read their CVs because they're interviewing you, so you know what you want to ask them in terms of their research and things like that. So that's really what it is. And in the end of the day, it's the reason why I really stayed is because I met all my attendings. I know them so well, and I think that they'd be fantastic teachers. So that's kind of the most important thing for me. Other things would be I did want to, I do plan on staying academic at least for as long as I can.
right.
So I did want somewhere where I can do research and I, have some support to do that. And then just of course the procedures, just being able to be in a comprehensive fellowship where you can learn as much as you can. And then of course the last thing is like the clinic and the general GI, which also comes up in the back of the mind as well for sure.
Okay. And now that you're all, signed, sealed, and delivered, you've got what, about 7.5 months before you actually pick up as an official advanced endoscopy fellow. So, what are you doing from the day? What have you been doing, and what will you be doing from the day you found out that you're going to stay at NYU till the day you start? What are you doing to prepare for that? Outside of the procedures and getting exposure, what are some of the other things that you're doing?
Um, I think yeah, definitely the procedures and exposure and just going, getting your hands on as much as you can. Um, Other things that I'm doing, so Dr. Kumta told me to read an EUS book, so I've been doing that. Reading one of the EUS, the one of the EUS books to kind of figure out what I'm doing, maybe a little bit better. I'm also reading an ERCP book by the Peter Cotton book,
Oh, yeah.
um, trying to figure out, how to put all this together and just getting the theoretical baseline that I should be at for when I start. I think it's probably overkill to do both, especially if you're, doing the procedures. But I think, the theoretical baseline behind these things is important. Otherwise, I'm just doing some research. I'm lucky enough to be enrolled in a master's program in Budapest, so I do spend a decent amount of
Oh,
time over
nice.
there, which is a whole nother thing that we could
Yeah,
talk.
we will have to talk about that offline. I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just research, reading what I can, doing as many procedures that I can, and then I'm planning a wedding. So that's like the other project that's always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, spend the time with your fiance now because your next 1 year is going to be pretty busy. You'll be coming home late quite a bit. So, um, the one thing that I would recommend to you as well as to any other is, one of the hardest things about starting an interventional fellowship in July is knowing that you have to take the general GI boards in October or September, whenever it is. So, if you're fortunate enough to match, you match almost a full year before you start. That's when I would put my head down and start doing all the prep you can because you're not going to have a lot of time. People say, I just start studying 4 weeks before, but trying to balance interventional fellowship that sometimes is 12 to 14-hour days. Again, non-ACGME accredited, so you aren't protected by any work hour restrictions. Technically, I mean, your institution will probably protect you, but legally there isn't really a requirement. And so you could have long days. And so it's very hard to study for a board exam while you're, coming home dead tired at the end of the day. And then I would also recommend going to Video GIE and YouTube and watching as many EUS procedures, educational ones, to really learn the anatomy. Because EUS, the first time you pick up a scope, I tell people it looks like bad TV reception, and then ultimately it clears up for you as you do enough of them. But you can give yourself a huge advantage by really watching and learning the information beforehand. So that's something I would recommend to most fellows. Okay. So are there any other rotations outside of, what you're talking about? Are there any other rotations that you're doing right now that you think will help you get prepared for the advanced year?
Yeah, I think the maybe not a rotation per se, but just reviewing every image and actually pulling it up and taking the time, especially at some places like the VA that we rotate at. It takes a lot longer than other places,
Yep.
but open it up, go through the image, look at the MRCP, look at the CAT scan. You take the time to do that because from what I understand, that's an extremely important skill to have when you do hit the
Yeah.
fourth year.
It definitely is. I mean, if you can spend some time with radiology and really learn at what you're looking at, that'll earn you so many brownie points with your advanced attendings. Um, All right, so it's a long road. Medical school, internal medicine residency, GI. Now we're talking about fourth year. So, what's like? Let's talk a little bit about wellness and boundaries and the human side of this. So, how have you kept yourself motivated? How have you kept yourself sane? What was some of the hardest things during this process?
Yeah, in terms of the work-life balance, I think we're all trying to figure that out still. And there's a lot of work-life integration going on in my life right now where, I do things on flights and things like that. I'm lucky enough to go to conferences. But in the end, I'm supported by a fantastic person. That's my fiance. My co-fellows are the best. I mean, everyone always says their
Yeah.
co-fellows are the best around. I hang out with them. I hung out with them Wednesday. I'm hanging out with them tonight. You know, it's all I mean, New York City is just a place where you could do anything at any time and grab good food whenever you want. So it's really just that, being surrounding yourself by good people that allow you to recharge after the busy 12-hour, whatever hour days, and the crazy application process and getting ready for the fourth year.
And what are you doing in terms of like physical health? Are you exercising? Are you getting enough sleep? What do you do? Because I think one thing that GI fellows, and not just advanced fellows, but GI fellows don't do enough of, or haven't historically done enough of, is core exercises, because you're standing sometimes 8 to 12 hours doing procedures, and back pain and back injuries are so common. Ergonomic injuries are or using poor ergonomics lead to injuries that are so common. So, what are some of the things that you're doing outside of academic work just to get your body ready for a long career? A career that could be 30 to 40 years long.
I think I was lucky enough to play, goalie, so I've always liked lifting weights. I go,
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a week. I'd love to play again goalie, but I'm just worried about I didn't get any disability insurance, and feels like that's just one thing I should wait a little bit more on before I get back to that. But
You should get it. I mean, these policies are cheap at your age.
I'm waiting to the very last minute just because, as everyone, fellow money is tight.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
100.
it's really those two things. Just staying active as much as you can. If you like pickleball, I mean, I've never really played it, but I played a few times and it's been so fun. And then I played golf like my fifth time the other day. So just
Yeah,
keeping active, trying your best to maintain the strength because, like you said, it is a long road
yeah.
for a lot of us.
And you got to develop hobbies. I mean, so many people I know in this field are married to interventional endoscopy. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You love your job, you do it, but at the same time, you need to have some external things that bring you happiness or joy, whether that is pickleball or writing or podcasting. Whatever it is you want to do, that can help you. But I want to land something with some like just kind of practical advice. So imagine you're talking to PGY1 resident tomorrow. What are three things that you would tell that person if they want to do advanced endoscopy? They come to you, they're PGY1, and they say, "Hey, I think I want to do GI, and I think I want to be an interventionalist." What are three things that you want to tell that person?
Absolutely. So the first one, and I kind of harped on this before, just being around and just always, being around endoscopy, being around the GI clinic, being around the fellows when you're a resident, being around the advanced fellows when you're a fellow, because things just come out, just happen and
Right.
opportunities just pop up. For example, I was offered this chance to go to masters in Budapest, which just kind of came up because I was in the right place at the right time, and I
Right.
was lucky enough to have fantastic mentors. So just being around things will work out, whether it be research, whether it be doing a procedure. A lot of the times when I was even a second year, the advanced fellows who were way into their year were like, "Oh, you want to do the EUS for an ERCP I'm about to do the pre-EUS for an ERCP?" Like just being around is 99% of the battle. I would say the other, I guess not 99%, but there's another two things that are important. One is again doing excellent work. Anytime you have an opportunity to do a good job, just do a good job. And I was actually a first year at the NYSGE course, and something that really stuck with me is Michael Bork, said, "Be a good doctor."
Yeah.
So just do good for your patients, try your best and do excellent work for, your patients, your research, your everything. And then the last thing, at this point is just saying yes, especially as a resident. Someone says, "Oh, I want you to write this paper that you don't really know anything about." Sure, make yourself uncomfortable, learn about something you don't know anything about, and write the paper. I know there's like a lot of pushback about saying yes to everything, and I think I'm getting to that part maybe in my career where like, oh, I've said yes to 1,000 things today. Maybe I should slow down. But especially when you're young and hungry and you want to do this, say yes to everything.
No, especially, I mean, that's a thing that longer in your career, if you want to grow your interventional practice, you have to be, your attitude has to be, yes, thank you. Can I have another one? Sometimes you get these consults for procedures that, are, not needed, or they're not really good indications. You don't have to do the procedure, but you say, yes, I'm willing to evaluate the patient. Yes, I'm willing to look into it, and just because, and once you do that and you say, I don't need to do this, they understand. They just want someone to take that burden off. So it's the same thing. You say yes, and then you work through it.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the very first thing you said about being around. There's an adage, out of sight, out of mind. I think the one here is insight in mind. So if you're available, you're seen, you're there, they notice you, they're going to think about you when it comes time to looking for opportunities, or whatever the case might be. What would you tell one of your first year GI fellows who's thinking about applying, but they're not 100% sure if they should or they shouldn't? What would you tell them to do?
I would tell them they should do it because it's the best. But
Yeah, if it's the worst set of
otherwise,
seats. No, right?
I would tell them just think long and hard because it is a path to get there, and it is a path once you're there, and there's things that go along with it, like increased complications and things like that. So think really for sure if you want to do it before you do it. Um, and then when you think that you want to do it and you're sure you want to do it, go at it full speed, 100%, because it really, to me, seems like the best job in the world. So do it and make sure you get it done.
100%. And what are some of the mistakes or myths that you would love to fix among some of your co-trainees that they think about advanced endoscopy? What is it that you'd love to fix in people's mindsets about advanced endoscopy?
Yeah, I mean, I like the pancreas. They are terrified about chronic pancreatitis or all these things with the pancreas. I think it's a cool organ that I've been looking at for a very long time. So that's definitely part of it. I mean, advanced endoscopy is hard work and you work long hours, but I think I've seen my attendings have fantastic lives outside of it. So,
Yeah.
that's the biggest myth, I guess, is that, my attendings are real people who do real things and are cool. So that's one of the big myths, I think.
Yeah, one thing I would also share being on the business side of this, people assume that advanced endoscopists make a lot more money. They actually make the same as general GI. Everyone's paid the similar number of RVUs and all that. And when you look at the breakdown of how many RVUs or units you generate doing a colonoscopy, it's less than if you do an ERCP, but the amount of time to do 2 colonoscopies is equivalent to 1 ERCP in a lot of institutions because of turnover and things like that. So you may be somebody who can do an ERCP in 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, but the room turnover, your anesthesiologist, the patients, all that takes time. So at the end of the day, you're making a very similar amount. So one of my biggest pet peeves was when people said, well, I think I want to do advanced. And I think it's because they make really good money. Well, that's A, the wrong reason to do it. And B, that's false. So, just, I think that's the one thing I would correct. And if the training is at a community or smaller academic program who maybe wasn't uh, fortunate, competitive, whatever the terminology is, or just not in the right place to get into an NYU, a Beth Israel, a Mayo, etc., and they don't have the ability to work with an in-house advanced endoscopist, what would you recommend to that person who's listening to this podcast? Like, well, this is great, but Dan had Dr. Kahela, he had Dr. Kana, he had all these people to talk to. I've got, 3 75-year-old screening colonoscopists in my program, and I don't have anything else to do. So how would you recommend that person get that exposure?
Yeah,
Please.
no, that's definitely a tough spot to be in. And from what I've talked about with people who were applying the same time, they were just so hungry and wanted it so bad. They did the things like the National Pancreatic Foundation, the CAPER program. They did things like, we were involved in ASGE committees and involved with other committees. They just found a way to get it done. They just networked really hard, met a ton of people, and in the end, maybe you won't get as much hands-on as someone at a place that's a little bit more bigger, I would say. But you're making the connections, you're going to get the letters, you're going to get the research you need to do if you really want it. So it's harder, I'm sure, but if you want it, there's a pathway.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an uphill battle, but people can climb hills. You just have to work hard for it, right? All right. So as we kind of wrap this up, I started doing this new thing on the podcast where I ask kind of quick questions, lightning round, if you will. So one procedure that you're most excited to master as an advanced fellow.
I don't think I'll master it as an advanced fellow, but the reason I did this was because I saw Dr. Kahila do a poem. So
Okay.
one day I'll get there.
Okay. One paper or one review or one book that you think every aspiring advanced fellow should read?
Um, that one's a little bit harder. Sorry.
That's okay. I put you on the spot. Sorry.
um, I think I remember reading a paper about exactly what we were talking about before, about the positions after the advanced endoscopy fellowship, how sometimes it's hard to find an academic position after. And I
Mhm.
think, you had to put this in the back of your mind as you're applying and doing all these things that there's a good chance a lot of us won't end up in academic spots after.
Okay. One non-GI book or podcast or resource that's influenced how you think about your career.
Oh, I was lucky at NYU in undergrad. I took a class on video games and how to be really good video game because I used to play all the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the book was Blink. And
Okay.
it's just how to make these snap decisions very, very well, or try to make them very, very well. It's
Is that
all
the
about
Malcolm Gladwell book?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And just learning that it worked great for real-time strategy video games, and now it's working for endoscopy. So I'll just keep it going.
Yeah, he lives in New York City. I wonder if you've ever just randomly seen him on the street somewhere. I mean, there's so many millions and millions of people there, but I just wonder if like he's in that area near NYU. So I'm just curious.
Oh. I'll look for him.
One thing that you wish programs would be doing differently when training GI fellows for advanced future careers.
I could always speak to my program, I guess, and I don't think I would change much. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be at a program where after you do the clinical responsibilities, you're on elective. And when you're on elective, you can do whatever you want, which means for me, just going to the advanced rooms and hanging out.
Mhm.
I don't know if every program's, I do know actually that not every program's like that. And I wish every program was like that because if you want to make that your career, while you should, of course, do the IBD, the liver, the other electives that you should do at least some point to be a good gastroenterologist, which you should be first before you think about this advance in the first place. Um, having the ability and flexibility to do whatever you want after you do those things is important.
And what just a quick get your opinion on it, because I think this is a conversation that's going around the country right now, and it's something I'm becoming a big believer in. Is I do think general GI fellowship needs to be shortened to 2 years, and I think the third year should be hepatology, IBD, advanced, whatever whatever your career focus, and you could stop at 2 years and go do general GI and screening and whatnot. And if you stay for the full three, that third year becomes one of those pathways. And then a fourth year fellowship would be specifically third space, endobariatrics, endohepatology, etc. So what do you think about when you hear that concept as somebody who's kind of going through this process right now?
Yeah, I heard that on the one of the prior episodes of the podcast, which was fantastic. I mean, I think that's the next step.
Yeah.
I think, general GI fellowship is an important tool to pick up the skills you need. But again, I think I don't know if this is from the podcast, but some, of other fellows potentially in the country may not be comfortable doing dilations and things that are should be within a general GI scope.
Yeah.
So potentially, there is a role for having a little bit more time, but 2 years seems enough to learn all those procedures and you already know the medicine because you did medicine residency. I
Yeah.
mean, I would be thrilled for it to only be 2 years, but we're not
Exactly.
there yet.
Yeah, exactly. We just do it for everybody else, I guess. And for the listeners who want to reach out to you or with questions, any social media or anything that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. My X handle, I guess, is
Yeah.
dmarino117. But my email is also daniel.marino at nyulangone, so .com. So just anyone who's applying, this is an adventure and something that I was really passionate about for a very long time. So if I could help anyone out to do this pathway, I'd be ecstatic to.
You may have just opened your email to recruiters, by the way. So
But I have not done that. No, I'm sorry. I'm apologizing to myself for doing that.
So, Dan, this has been really helpful. Thanks for pulling back the curtain and letting people know what, building a path towards what you're going to be starting soon. And I think I'm really happy for you. Can't wait to see what you do. Can't wait to actually, potentially work alongside you at some point in the future. So I'm going to follow your journey really, really well. So thank you so much for spending some time with me. I know it's a Friday night in New York City, so you got better things to do than talk to me, but I appreciate that. And for everyone listening, thank you everyone who's listened. If you enjoyed the episode, please drop a like or subscribe. If you are somebody like Dan and you're starting your career, it's really important to get involved with the societies. If you want to be an interventional endoscopist, ASGE and FIGHT are the two societies I would really recommend investing your time in. Obviously, the more involved you are, the better it is for yourself, but also for the subspecialty, for all of us to grow together. And if you are somebody who's struggling with any issues from mental health, it's really important to seek help. Speak to people. There's no shame in it. Mental health issues arise every single day. Take care of your wellness, whether it's talking to friends or joining an app or going to Better Health, etc. Those are the type of things to do. So, Dan, once again, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and it was great to talk with you.
This is amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This is a fantastic time.
Thank you.
Please hit that like button and that subscribe button.